thing. Okay, turn monitoring off. Okay. Let me know if I'm a little bit low. I have made some adjustments to my mixer. I do in a virtual mixer. Alright, I'm gonna drop that down a little bit. I love randomly opening you to see a stream starting. Hi, name. Let me see. Okay. We're gonna just hop into it. Oh no, I don't want to cut it off like that all the way. Okay, we'll just leave it a little bit on for now. Okay, so... Bam! Oh, I get that name. So I have my new guy here, thanks to lovely Lynn. So this is gonna be an odd duck stream. This is gonna be my first time kind of actually let me grab something that's a little bit more like mellow, because that's a bit too much energy for what we're gonna be talking about. So I think we'll do desktop audio for now, because I'm not gonna listen to anything else in the background. There we go. Some ambient music. Fuck, I should turn off Discord. Okay. Well, I don't know if someone's gonna call me on Discord. Whatever. But, so this could be like an odd duck stream, just because it's my first time kind of like delving into more like an educational thing on my own without like Valji to back me up. So, let me think. Oh yeah, I didn't introduce Drawn Pippi. That was also made by Lynn. I just dropped it into DaVinci and made it into like a GIF that blinks and breathes. And I have a couple other. I have like two like hand positions I can swap to, and I also have like annoyed, and then annoyed but like not as annoyed. So I really like how this looks. It looks really good. I kind of changed my overlay background just to kind of make it a bit more mellow, just because like I think bright red with like our subject matter is gonna be a bit harsh to look at. Okay, so music is still a bit too loud for my liking. So like I need to figure out how we're gonna do this. So we are going to be talking about kind of like the history of, what's what I'm looking for, like prison design, some like practices in prison design, like some like and we're going to look at like one location. So I was looking at, the History Channel, like Modern Marvels, and I watched it today because I was trying to get some notes on like some pieces I would like to cover, just because I don't think I could really watch the whole thing without getting clapped by YouTube. So I can watch like a couple like clips from it, and I'll kind of like help lead into different parts of the stream. So we're gonna start with this fella here. I think it's what he talked about was pretty important. So we're gonna start here.
You know, you can't understand what a step forward fourth generation radiopodular jail planning was till you understand what sheriffs had to put up with before. You know, you would have this box, and then you would have...
Okay, so right now he's kind of talking about the path of travel. At least that's what this drawing is trying to convey.
And you'd have a jailer come in from one end, and it was all blind. If the jailer didn't walk up and down the corridor, often within close proximity to the grated bar fronts of the cells, he or she didn't know what was going on inside their own jail, if prisoners were being assaulted, if other things were happening. So that was sort of
How am I them spreading Fauci? He's a bit loud. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate it for letting me know. Okay.
first generation. Then what happened is
They're
they
about
started
there.
doing a day room so that you came in here, and this is during the day, and prisoners came out of their cells and they were in this common meeting room that was equipped with tables or a TV or what have you. And that was sort of second generation, all right?
Okay.
The third generation actually created a mezzanine where
So, when I was looking at Modern Marvels, I'm gonna be messing that up. They talk about like the original kind of like prison was more sort of like holding cells, and well, it was more like religious, like kind of like more handled by the church within their own sort of ranks, and didn't become more like secular and become like more of a like a non-religious aspect till later.
you would have cells maybe around a central point, and you had a control station here, and that control station really had much better visibility into all the cell fronts
Hi, Balarna.
than was previously the case.
We
And
just
this would-
hopped into we're gonna be talking about like prison design, architecture, a little bit of history. Watching this guy because he's kind of like giving sort of like a rundown of like the sort of the evolution of like prison architecture. I thought it was like a cute, like a not a cute video, but like a fun, like sort of like dipping our toe in at the beginning.
Would be what we would call the third generation, and it would have a mezzanine, you know, and the mezzanine had stairs, you know, and so you had cells stacked up, and what it did is it brought a greater number of cell fronts within closer visual proximity to the control officer, and this was a big step forward in jail design or prison design throughout the United States. All right, now. For a state prison, it may have worked because you have a much larger number of prisoners where you're divided into discrete numbers.
Well, another aspect of this is that prefabricated design eventually became like a very important part of at least modern prisons. Because he's talking about like stacking prisons, but usually it wasn't exactly like how he's describing it. It was a lot more. Stacking prisons is a more of a modern sort of concept for how prisons are laid out today. A lot of them, the older ones I was looking at, have been more like long, like single-story buildings. One of them we're gonna look at is kind of like that, but like bringing prefab into prison design has its ups and downs. Its pricing is a lot better, but it is more like homogenized, in my opinion. But like that's kind of like the expectation with the prison. I'll talk a bit about it because I have a doc that is basically like the standards of like prison design.
Let's say, and this might be 60 to 80 prisoners
Well, go take care of that name. I'll be
in
here.
this day room. And that worked. The problem is for county jails in particular, if you had a 100-bed or a 60-bed or a 200-bed, smaller numbers, how do you divide this up into discrete groups that can be classified more easily into smaller groups of 8 or 12 or 16 or 24, all right? Because in a smaller jail, you still have the same classification challenges you have in a larger facility, you just have a smaller number. Okay, so what happened is we started looking.
Yeah, he has to take as he's talking about, he has to take into consider the design for scale and like proportion and ratio to people to each location that they're going to be building.
And this would have been in the early to mid 80s. Okay, we started looking at the idea of that same control station.
Oh, okay,
But
okay,
this
okay, okay,
time-
okay. Yes, yes. So this design is more like a kind of like the Panopticon, but not really. It's more like he can see out. There's windows everywhere. We're gonna eventually get to like a part in the Marvels where they kind of show like a 3D visual representation of this that looks really cool. So you get like a better idea of just mind's eye. You don't have to think it too hard with your mind's eye to kind of visualize what he's trying to show in this sketch.
You have a sally port, a corridor around the control station, which is enclosed in glass. You have a series of pods surrounding that control station that Mr. or Miss Jailer can still look into, just like they could before. But this time, this might be 8, this is 16, 16, 12, 8, 8, 12. And those
Oh, okay. So the beds
pods
are pods.
can
Okay.
be tailored to reflect the classification that's found within the crime or sentencing pattern that particular jurisdiction has experienced. And you can research this, which is what we do, as the back half of what's called needs assessment. In other words, it's not just to determine the number of prisoners, male and female, that a jurisdiction needs, but you're also trying to break those groups down into discrete groups: bad check riders, lower security, axe murderers, higher security, cop killers, God forbid, and so forth. And you begin to determine those patterns and let all of these pods reflect those sentencing patterns, so that what you're arming the sheriff and his jail staff with is the most powerful jail management tool of all: the opportunity to use a good proactive classification system for the operation, the management of their.
Okay, so he's just talking about like managing their expectation with who is in which cell. So that's kind of why I went in with that video. So I'm gonna go down here. So this one is we're gonna get like a virtual tour of a county jail. This one's pretty interesting to look at. I'll drop it down just because.
Hi, I'm Corrections Deputy Rachel Smith, and I've been with Pierce County Sheriff's Department since March of 2021. Let me give you
I think this one's interesting just because you get to see kind of like a guided tour.
So this is the new jail vehicle Sallyport. When individuals are arrested and brought in, they're first given a pat search
Trying to
right
make
here,
sure
and then they proceed into
get the
booking
audio at a
to
good
begin
level.
the booking process. Let me show you what that's about. So individuals are brought in up to this booking bar right here, where they're given an additional pat-down search. They begin taking off all their property and handing it over to the corrections deputies to be placed in the property bag, as well as put in the body scanner to get scanned for any drugs or weapons. When individuals are brought into
This
the
right here I
facility,
found interesting.
all their property is placed in a property bag.
So like I always wondered like where exactly do they keep people's like belongings when you get brought to jail? And at least for this like location, it's like in this like sort of like it's clothing, not clothing zip, but like if you were to like put like a suit or something in a bag sort of like this is where they keep your belongings until you let go. I always thought they keep it like in a locker or something, not like literally in a bag.
And that will remain back here until they are released. Once individuals have been cleared from the scanner, they're placed in a jail uniform. They take off all their personal clothes and put on the jail uniform. Right here in this dress-out room here, some individuals do require a strip search based on their charges. Once individuals have been booked into the system, they're brought over here so that they can get their photos done as well as their fingerprints. Once their fingerprints and photos are taken, they're brought over here to speak with the nurse, and they provide all medical information required.
See that the blue lives, red lives matter flag. Oh boy.
So that they can be medically treated while in the facility. After that, they're placed in a holding cell to be brought over to intake. When escorting individuals back to the new jail for release, they're brought back here. If individuals have been transported from the main jail, they'll still be in cuffs. So here we would remove their handcuffs, and then
Charlie, second floor, that's where I got it.
they would have a seat on the bench. If the release officer is ready for them, they'd be brought over here, and they would begin the release process in giving them back their property out of their property bag, and then releasing them out this door over here. This is the release office. Right here is the release window. Some individuals that would come here are
Okay.
people that are
I
turning
don't think
themselves
this
to
is...
Charlie. Looks
Okay,
like,
here we go. Actually get into the jail proper. I was like wondering where
looks
we're
like
gonna
we're
get into
dealing
that.
with the
So
aftermath
that's the beginning of
fight
this.
into Charlie. So just two. So we're into Charlie. Looks like there was a fight. The unit officer observed it, told them to stop fighting, and they did. He placed one of them outside in between the units, and escorts arrived to assist them out of the unit. Once we arrived, it was all over, and we no longer needed for the assistance. So this is one of the units in the new jail. It's called 2 Charlie. We currently have a little over 80 inmates being able to be housed in this unit.
Man, it's crowded. It looks crowded. IMO.
These are lower level offenders with good behavior, so that's
Oh,
why they're housed
I didn't
in
know that,
this open
Nintendo
dorm
Mail.
setting with the desk in the unit as well. We're on the upper tier
Actually,
of 2 Charlie.
I think, trying to remember. I think one of the videos I was looking at for this, I think it may have been the My Marvels one. It was talking about like that sort of thing.
As you can see, they have bunk beds
I would have to
in
like
here.
scrub
Again, it's
for it
open
again.
dorm, so they don't have their own cells. They're all housed up here together with a shared bathroom and shower. So this right here is the laundry room. This is where they wash all of the inmate
Oh boy,
uniforms.
I love motorcycles.
The inmates are provided with clean clothes twice a week in their units, and we have inmate workers that are responsible for assisting with cleaning all of the laundry. This right here is the kitchen. The trustees assist with cooking, cleaning, and prepping food for the remainder of the jail. All the trays are then
I
supplied
said this is
to the
more
main
like
jail and the new jail.
a small-time modern like look at a prison. So
Jail
we're not gonna. It's
So this is
probably
central control. This is where you
okay,
are
here we go.
responsible
So-
for operating the movement of gates throughout the facility.
Okay. So the older gentleman did basically talked about this specific setup. This one is a bit more closed off than the other one we're gonna see in Modern Marvels, but this looks very, very close to what they were describing.
When a code blue or a medical emergency is called within the facility, it's extremely important to get to the gate right away, open the gate, and let all responding individuals into the unit. You're then responsible for calling the code over the radio to ensure that all of your
You see, oh, it's a bit fuzzy, but we can see like the layout of the prison here. The cross shape and everything, all the units are kind of placed around this main shape, if I'm understanding this correctly.
workers hear the code and are able to respond in a timely manner. If there is a medical emergency, in addition to calling the code and opening the gates, you will need to call for
I had to like
911
tilt my head to
for
see it.
medical aid so that they can arrive and assist the individual with their needs. So we left the new jail and now we're headed to the main jail. This is where more serious offenders are housed with more severe behavior problems, as well as we do have general population unit.
That is like a very constant thing that I see, that there is like a very strict distinction between like say like low harm offenders versus like high harm offenders, where like there is a what's sort of looking at like a expectation of more strict like control of their behavior and like their movement, the more like the more dangerous criminalists. I was trying to get that word out.
But
Drink
they
some
still
water.
have more serious charges than individuals that are housed in the new jail. We're now entering 3 South. This is our maximum security unit. This is where we house all of our most serious offenders with behavioral issues and very serious charges. A lot of these individuals have assaulted staff, and so they're now placed in here on security alerts, requiring 2 COs to get them out of their units for their timeout. We currently have 2 tiers of this unit with 5 cells on each tier, and they are double-doored units, so you have to enter the outer door and enter the inner door to get the inmate out of the unit. When individuals are housed in 3 South, they're only given 1 hour out a day. That's a 23-hour lockdown. When they are out for their hour, they're given access to use the phones, use the multi-purpose room, or to take a shower. This is the control booth in 3 South. The officer that is in here is responsible for opening the
Okay, here we go.
doors
Never a
to
version
the
of the control
units and the
booth.
doors inside the units to allow the officer in the unit to gain access to the inmates. So this is our medical facility. The difference between this jail and some smaller jails is that we have medical staff to treat inmates for more minor issues instead of sending them out to the hospital for every issue.
Oh.
The individuals that work here as medical staff are able to assist inmates in wound care.
Who's going berserk?
and
Sorry, I
other
think I
basic
missed something.
needs.
I was
And
checking.
they also provide their medication at the units. That's it. Hope you enjoy.
Okay. So, okay, okay. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, so the other thing I was gonna look at is the Panopticon, but I wanted to kind of go. Okay, so we're gonna go here.
The Panopticon.
There we go. So this person is just kind of like gonna be narrating over kind of like a 3D model of the Panopticon and talking about a bit. I'm gonna go to Marta Marvels just for a little bit because I found like a couple of things interesting in this sort of like little video. I'm gonna make it 1.25 speed just because like I don't know about YouTube copyright stuff. I'll try not to watch too much of this, just be safe. But a couple of things like mentioned in this episode I think are really important. So small preamble to this, they were showing different military tech ways to kind of like breach walls and stuff like that if there's like a riot.
A lot of technology has been developed just for the correctional industry, but a lot of the development that has come out of defense activities has been now applied to the correctional industry.
The toughest and most incorrigible inmates are housed in super maximum security prison units, which generally have the most advanced technology.
Supermax facilities have evolved as a concept in the last 10 years to deal with some of the most problematic inmates in the system, to get them out of the rest of the facilities in the system. So we're just going to get them in an environment where we can really batten down the hatches.
So it goes back to what she was talking about, like the more like the need, quote, for more security. So I am then gonna go to 602 there. Bam. Okay, this is gonna talk about the first prison.
Prison design was almost an afterthought. Very structures that were built for other purposes were adapted for use as holding cells, but had not been designed initially with the intention of making them prisons.
The first known system of prisons was a series of dungeons built above the main sewers in Rome between the 3rd and 1st centuries BC. Here, prisoners were confined in large rooms. From the 4th century and until the Renaissance, the Roman Catholic Church contributed.
Okay, so I remember that. It was Rome were first prisons, and then it became it got evolved when the church became involved centuries later.
Greatly to the evolution of the prison. Throughout Europe and in England, church authorities imprisoned both clergy and lay people who violated canon law. They were housed in monasteries and abbeys.
If monk.
Okay, so this one talks about like monks' punishments, and then we're gonna go to secular prisons. Yeah, secular prisons. Okay, there we go.
And the development of public law.
So when there was a more separation, it's not the correct term, but it's like the division between church and state. There became like a distinct difference between prisons made and used by religious organizations, and then prisons made and used by non-religious organizations.
Castles and fortresses always were built with strong rooms on lower levels to store material in case the castle was under siege. Those rooms could be used later, particularly when castles had no military value. They could be used to house prisoners.
Ruling monarchs used castles such as the Tower of London or France's Bastille to lock away political rivals.
Okay.
By the 5th.
So now that we're gonna go back to that in a little bit. Let me see, make sure it does secret prisons. Okay, so we're gonna go to this, like, no, I think, yeah, okay. Okay, I'm trying to make sure I structure this properly, just because, like, it's gonna be a bit weird. Okay, so okay. So this one's like, hey, do you know the United States has the largest prison population on the planet? Oh man, I love living here. Okay, and then okay, there. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this one is going to be talking about architecture reform and the Panopticon. So I'm gonna first pop us over to this video right here. This kind of gives us a rundown of the Panopticon, and then we can go back to the Marvels one so we can get like another view of it.
Panopticon is the form of the ideal prison. Designed around 1787 by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Over 300 prisons around the world follow this model. A circle of diameter of 100 feet. Around the perimeter of this circle stretch cells.
Turn up a little bit.
Each cell is 9 feet deep and 48 per floor. Each cell has a toilet, a bed, and space to work. The cells rise 6 floors. On every other floor, there is a surveillance corridor, in which a guard may survey 2 floors of prisoners. The guard watches the prisoners, but the prisoners do not see the guard and do not know when they are watched, and must therefore act as if they were always watched. 3 guards each see 96 prisoners, which makes 288 prisoners total. In the center of the space, there is an auditorium, in which the prisoners may assemble to be lectured. A wall of screens.
In more modern versions of this, it's more like a tower. If you guys ever seen the first Guardians of the Galaxy, there is essentially a Panopticon used where like all the main characters kind of meet in a prison, but they're in a prison, and is somewhat designed like the Panopticon, where there's like a tower in the middle watching out for the other people.
Rise surrounding the chapel and separating the prisoners from seeing into it, or from seeing each other from across the void of the empty space in middle. Spiral staircases ascend through the space.
I just want to say the person that did this did a fantastic job, like building this up. It's like really good.
And an iron and glass frame rises through the space and vaults over the chapel. This completes the Panopticon, the form of the ideal prison.
To say all in one word, the Panopticon will be found applicable, I think, without exception, to all establishments whatsoever.
Jeremy Bentham.
See, it's very, the music with it is very unsettling. Okay, we're gonna stop right there because it's gonna weird me out a bit. So, okay. So, check these real quick. Okay, so I will pull this up because I hadn't got a chance to look through this specifically, but I think it'll be important later. We're gonna go back to Modern Marvels and we're gonna look at the architecture reform Panopticon.
Back in the mid-1800s, a wave of architectural reform swept through prisons. Englishman Jeremy Bentham proposed new designs to make prisons more secure and easily managed. One of the popular designs Bentham instituted was called the Panopticon Plan.
And the arrangement of these prisons had to be that the governor could look from the windows of his central hub house into all the cells that radiated like...
So this is, you can already tell this is very different than the 3D model that person went through. That one was a bit more elaborate. This one is more like a tower that's looking out to the other people in the cell. Yeah, that is it Michel Foucault? I think it was Michel Foucault. I would have to pull my book down talked about like the panopticons, like with the mental game the panopticon plays with you, where it's like it's not just the watch guard watching you, it's also other people watching you. So it like instills like a sense of paranoia.
Spokes of a wheel from that center. And the idea was that he could keep an eye not only on the inmates but also on the guards. It didn't work very well.
The panopticon design didn't work because the architecture made it impossible for the governor to see all areas of the institution from his office. In America, a prominent...
Yeah, so like, though I think like though it didn't work exactly how they wanted, I think like the paranoia of it like kind of had like an effect. You know what I mean? Like it isn't. It's one thing I've noticed like watching through this this like video is that there's always like something that doesn't quite work with the specific architecture that they choose to use, or system they choose to compensate for what they want in this particular like location or prison or population. So we have the Panopticon, and then we are going to now look at the Eastern Penitentiary. So that one is okay. So yeah, that's up next. So okay. I'm trying to make sure I don't get ahead of myself. But yes, we're gonna look at the Eastern Penitentiary part. I'm gonna pause up time to kind of shift over to like at least 2 websites I have pulled up, just so I'm not like just watching this.
For the governor to see all areas of the institution from his office. In America, a prominent doctor named Benjamin Rush had other ideas about what a prison should look like. He believed prisons should remove not only the dangerous people from society, but also they should try to reform inmates into law-abiding citizens. With that in mind, the Quakers helped establish the first true prison in America, called the Walnut Street Jail.
So it's the Quakers. They didn't just make oatmeal, they made prisons.
A place where inmates would do penance. Hence the term penitentiary was created.
Yeah.
It consisted of a series of
it's a pretty like that's actually interesting, like that sort of evolution came from like being like more religious focused. It will I don't include any of like the solitary confinement pieces that are in this video, but they say like a lot of these practices with solitary confinement came from like prayer and self-reflection on like what your wrongs have, reflecting on your wrongs. But we know nowadays that solitary confinement is very detrimental to the people who are forced to like do that, forced to be like locked away by themselves. That like it causes like severe harm to people.
But as the Walnut Street Jail became seriously overcrowded, they planned to build a large prison, now a state prison.
This resulted in the construction of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, which adopted the Quaker philosophy of punishment by solitary confinement.
Okay,
it later
so yeah.
became known as the Pennsylvania system.
So, go back here. So this is the Eastern State Penitentiary. So I kind of like pull up a couple of websites. So this is where you can see what it looks like right nowadays. As it like cuts back to these different pieces of footage. I have to check down. I think in this one is it has the floor, not the floor plan, but the site plan. So I'm gonna go down here. No, okay, it's not this one, but this is sort of like an overview. Pretty interesting. I'll go here. This is why I want to go Septal. So this is like a photo of like what it looks like currently today. And I want to go, okay. Okay, in the decades following the American Revolution, a major intellectual export to come out of the newly formed United States was prison design and reform. By the early 19th century, the Pennsylvania system of justice had been developed, replacing corporal punishment with Quaker-inspired isolation and labor. Proponents believed that criminals who reflected deeply on their crimes by spending their days in 24 hours of silence would become genuinely penitent for their crimes and would, as a result, be reformed. But we all know, like, locking people away by themselves for, like, days and days and days, like, does severe mental harm to people. Go. Opened in 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary became quickly the archetype for this revolutionary system of justice. Equally notable for its architecture and mechanical advances, Eastern State served as the structural and ideological model for more than 300 prisons around the world. In architect John Haviland's radial design, cell blocks of the okay, let me restart that again. My brain is just not wanting to work. You drink some water? Okay. From the top. Okay. In architect John Haviland's radial design, cell blocks of the prison extend outward from a central surveillance area. In the block were prisoners' private cells, each with a adjacent outdoor exercise yard enclosed by a 10-foot wall. Prisoner cells were equipped with central heat, running water, flushing toilets, and skylights, at a time when such innovations were rarely available in homes, let alone prisons. Now we go down here. I'm trying to remember. So this is some photos of what the interior looks like now. But I actually want to new tab. Show off this. So this is basically the center, and then each of these branches branch off from here. And there are some extra side buildings, I believe. This one. Okay, there. Ooh. I think it was side buildings, or I'm remembering something different. Maybe I remember something different, but like, this is huge, and we'll find out that this prison design as well didn't work for a very specific reason. So we're gonna go back to Mom Marvels, and they're gonna give us a little 411.
Eastern was a radical departure in prison architecture. This floor plan shows its radial cell block design.
So the design was set up in this hub and spoke manner.
So you see like that? It's like hub and spoke, but more like kind of like the Panopticon, but like more like what the older gentleman in the first video we watched where the older gentleman was talking about previous designs. This is more like the guard has to now travel all the way down back and forth to see everyone in their cell. There is going to be more manpower you need to have people like constantly patrolling than if you were to have them like more facing the center where you can see everybody.
In order to improve supervision of the inmates and thereby prevent escapes.
The philosophy behind Eastern was to keep the inmates separate from each other, to prevent them from forming gangs and organizing riots or escapes. When a prisoner first arrived, he was escorted to his cell with a hood over his head.
This is fucking crazy. I'm not gonna lie, when I heard that, I'm like, excuse me? Why would you do that? You take him to an execution?
Could not see the other prisoners or where he was going, and they in turn could not see him.
The prison was designed in the way it was to ensure that the prison could carry out its philosophy of solitary confinement for all of the inmates.
By 1820 standards, Eastern was massive, with nearly 11 acres inside its walls. The outside wall was 1/2 mile around and 8 feet thick at the base. Eastern was one of the first prisons to build towers. The front building was 200 feet long, with a square tower turret at each end. It also had a guard tower on the roof of its central rotunda.
The cells were quite large enough that an inmate would not only have his living space, but also room for a workbench, a loom, machinery, tools, raw materials, whatever he needed in order to do his assigned work, which would be everything from...
So even back then, there was like a focus on like having prisoners basically be like labor, essentially labor for the state. Yeah. There is a, I don't know if I particularly time-stamped it here, but there was a discussion on whether the prison is surrounded by walls or it's more open, really like denotes like its view on like criminals and rehabilitation. Like the higher the walls or the more thickness of the wall, not thickness of the walls, but like when there's a separation between like them and the rest of society, it shows you how society views criminals.
Weaving or dyeing cloth, making shoes, caning chairs, things of this nature. It all is done in the individual cell.
But the hub-and-spoke architecture of Eastern Penitentiary had many design flaws.
Okay, here we go, the design flaws.
It was expensive to design, build, and operate a prison of this kind because the rooms, the individual cells, had to be so large. And also because having the inmates by themselves, working by themselves, they could not take advantage of the techniques of factory production. So there was less opportunity to make money for the inmates to produce revenue for the institution. So
basically giving them like a bit of comfort with the space in their rooms was detrimental to the amount of people that get stuffed. Like, so like, let me see. I actually made a prison in in Blender. I like designed like a sort of like a prison sort of like room and holding cell for like a visual novel I like made for like a game jam thing. Let me get that. Let me see. Sometimes Blender is a bit funky when you're trying to grab stuff, so I pull up here. Come on, there we go. Okay, bam. Okay, so it's come on. Oh, fuck. Okay, I guess I have to grab it another way. Give me a second. So, well, at least I have to cast to look at why I'm trying to figure this out. Let me see. Let's do display capture real quick. There we go. Okay. Just grab that and bring that down. There we go. So, when I kind of go into like kind of the standards and practices of like architecture design, there is like a very narrow allowance for space for like prisoners' cells. So, yeah, I'm gonna delete that. I don't need that, and I'll go, bam. So this is kind of like me kind of using the sort of the jail design like standards to kind of make a room. So if I like kind of drop down here, you see how very like tight and small. I gave them like a bed and like a table and a toilet, but like a lot of these are very, very tight and close together. And a lot of the ones I was looking at, I was trying to find like good examples, are usually 2 stories, probably more, with like a path that leads you down to like sort of like a not a mess hall, but like a gathering sort of area, kind of like what that lady was showing in her sort of like virtual tour. But that one was obviously more crowded because it had like a secondary hallways covered with like a fence, not barbed wire, but like a, I guess fence is the only word I can think of. Then I have like, let me pull this here. I don't have my this is shown off as textureless because I like moved this so there's no texture, and there is like a hallway that I have it branching off. Yeah. So it's I'm sorry, it's a bit this is kind of my old architecture project. So it's kind of like, I think it's a bit taller than it would normally be. It'd probably be a lot shorter, but you have to kind of like fuck with the dimensions a bit when you're trying to like render a piece, just because like your camera can like distort how things come out when you're rendering. Control Z. Okay. I'm gonna do that. I am gonna close this because I don't need it open anymore. Because I showed you guys that. We're gonna go, let me see. Okay, so we're done with this. I want to go to another part. 1942. Okay, 42. Okay.
This is all
Here we go. This is Sing Sing.
that remains of Sing Sing's original cell block today.
They realized that they could put more inmates in a given space if they stacked them on top of each other. So they built cells on top of cells.
To control the swinging grill doors from a central location at the end of the tier, there's this device at the top of the cells. In later years, a new locking technology appeared, which was less vulnerable to tampering. It let staff open 50 cells at one time by pulling a lever. It was safer and more efficient for prison staff.
The advantage was that you could open all the cells at the same time. It was a new thing. You didn't have to individually key lock or key open each cell, which is what you had to do before that.
But if an officer had to open a cell individually, he would use a 5-inch long paracentric key. It has grooves which cover over the center of the key. It originated in the early 1900s to open the lever tumbler lock. Some prisons, like Sing Sing, still use it today.
Another thing I noticed is that there seems to be... No, actually, no, we're gonna get to that. Never mind. I was like, oh, did I mark that bit? Yeah.
The paracentric key was later upgraded to today's oversized style, called a Maxi Mogul key. It is used for pin tumbler locks at more modern prisons, and is harder for inmates to replicate.
Okay, let's get that. Okay, so they talk a bit about Alcatraz, but I don't want to cover Alcatraz too much, because I'm gonna go a bit further into the Eastern Penitentiary. But I don't mind like doing a separate stream on specifically Alcatraz, just because that one's a very interesting prison. But we're gonna go to this other part, which I thought was pretty interesting. Pull it up. There we go. Okay.
Responsibility of the state who's operating the facility.
What's important in prison design is that it makes it easy for officers to see inmates in a cell block. Some architects provide 3D computer animation to prison authorities before construction, so that they can confirm that the structure being built will serve their needs.
Well, one of the important things in designing a facility, a correctional facility, is for the officers, they're supposed to be supervising what is going on.
So at least for this design, there is a focus on having like as much visibility as possible. So there's like windows
make
everywhere.
sure they can see everything. Second thing is
it could also, I assume, like they could also like substitute these windows for like wire or just bars if they want.
Acoustically being able to hear. In a housing unit, we try to design these so that an officer in a unit can kind of be aware of what's going on around him, just in terms of noise level, activity levels. If a fight breaks out or a scuffle, he can hear that, he can respond to it immediately.
The most common approach to maximum visual design is a central control room.
So the older gentleman talked about like the central control room, and this is like a more like we saw this in the young ladies tour, but this like I think is a bit more of what you think about when you visualize like a central control for a prison.
Basically, the officer is in a glass room that has remote controls and remote communication into housing units.
This design is called a pod. The officer sits at the center, surrounded by cells on both sides. Surveillance cameras line the cell blocks.
Yes, so this was also related to that the older gentleman, where he's like, okay, so you have the central pod, and then you have the pods where the other prisoners are located.
As a result of the riots that were taking place across the country in the 70s, there were changes in the designing for what is the most useful number of inmates to have in any housing area, and what is the best way to arrange the configuration. And around the country, you'll see the podular units.
Yes.
The design and construction of cells
Here we go.
have also changed.
We're down to the prefabrication. So when you're looking at redundancy, so I did a project for homelessness. It was basically trying to combat homelessness by using prefabbed units placed in a parking garage. So the benefits of like a prefab like unit is that you save on materials and construction. It's just brought to your location. You do have to pay for like transportations and such, but like they're going to talk about like what specifically is beneficial for these because of the nature of prisons.
Some jails, like Rikers Island in New York City, use cells that are prefabricated in a factory in Pennsylvania. They are made of concrete and steel and are delivered by truck in units which consist of 2 cells joined by a plumbing and electrical closet. The cell units are hoisted by crane into a prepared steel structure, which is the framework of the jail. The precast construction also serves as a safety feature by making it almost impossible for an inmate to break off any part of the cell to fashion a weapon. Next to the cell is a safety feature that provides security for prison staff, should the cell have a maintenance problem.
In the past,
yeah, so these are not directly connected to the cells. They're on the exterior of the cell. He's gonna tell you like they are able to do work if there's any like issues with plumbing or water or anything. They don't have to like get people out. They basically don't have to vacate cells to do any type of maintenance and such. So I thought that was pretty interesting with this video, and I think I'm done with this video for now. So what we are gonna now move on to is I'm gonna pull up this. Oh. We're gonna look at this for a little bit. So this is, make sure you can see with me. Okay. So this is the 3rd edition of the jail design or like standards for the Department of Justice. I picked out a couple like interesting blurbs. I know, like looking back on it, I know I missed something very specific I wanted to like go into, which was like jail room size. I felt that was very interesting, but like if I can't quickly find that, then we'll just move on because I don't want to bore you guys with me hunting through a PDF. I'm gonna drink some water and then we're gonna get into a bit of this. Oh, no, nice thing. I have my Steam Deck set up so I can just like mute myself quickly. I changed my like my mixer settings, so my audio is gonna be a bit weird until I kind of figure it out better. So bear with me while I try to figure things out. Okay, so this is the foreword in the jail design. So this is the 3rd edition. The 3rd edition. I have like the 2 other editions, but I figured those do not matter currently. And they kind of talk about like the difference between this and the previous editions. New jail construction is a major capital undertaking that often represents the single largest project in which county officials will ever be involved. Many local jurisdictions are placing outdated facilities as well as expanding bed space to accommodate increased numbers of inmates. The U.S. Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that as of June 2008, the total rated capacity of the nation's jails was 813,502 beds, up from an estimated 677,787 beds at mid-year 2000. So this 3rd edition was made in 2011. Very weird, Jim. Yes, so put in here, the Jail Design Guide 3rd edition is revised and expanded version of the original small jail design guide published in 1988. So, the first older guy talked about like the change in prison design in the 1980s. Oh no, my voice is going. Ah! Oh no. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. The focus of what is now simply entitled the Jail Design Guide. The 3rd edition was brought in for 2 reasons. Increase in local jail populations had significantly reduced the demand for new jails of only 50 or fewer beds. So, they're building bigger prisons. That's what that's saying. And there's less of a focus on smaller prisons because of that. Reflection and feedback on the previous edition have made it clear that most of the issues raised in the original document apply equally to jails of any size. So scale doesn't change like what you need for all of them. I think that is it for that. So when I had to do how do I say it? Let me drink some more water. I don't. Sorry, I usually don't yap like in this specific like context. I'm trying to like get used to it. But when I had to do a class project and it was about, I don't know if it was about specifically. I know I picked jails and the Panopticon specifically, but I found like this section to be like the most like, I won't say upsetting, but kind of like sad. So we're talking about I'll just read the whole page. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get in trouble for reading this because it's like you don't buy this. It's a standard that you have to follow. The jail projects an image and sends a message to the people who pass by it. Pass by, visit, work, or are confined there. Although the way each person responds to the jail depends on why he or she is there, the building's image helps people recognize the type of place it is and establish their expectations of what will happen there and how they will be treated and how they should behave. I'm gonna go to the description of the exterior. The outside of the building conveys a message to the public about law enforcement and the role of the jail in the community. Jurisdictions should decide whether they wish to convey an image of community service, deterrence, frugality, or some other quality. In considering the jail's appearance, jurisdictions should take into account the context in which it will be located. If it is to be located downtown, it may be important to repeat the materials, colors, and scale of surrounding buildings so that it fits in. If the jail is to be near or adjacent to other government buildings, it is probably desirable for the jail to complement those buildings to create a unified identifiable government image. So that's kind of when you are building buildings close to other buildings, depending on what the building's purpose is, what it's meant to do, what you want to convey, like generally, you do try to either match the materials of the surrounding space, or you try to go against it, but like in a way that complements other buildings. So when we talk about building height, if other buildings are about like 1-story, 2-story, you won't build like a 6-story, 8-story building right next to it. You try to like complement the height of surrounding buildings. So that's done with that. So go to the interior. The interior image and character of jail environment will. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Let me restart. The interior image and character of the jail environment will be most important to staff and inmates, but will also be important to visitors. The interior of the jail can also express and reinforce an expectation about inmate behavior, since all people tend to respond to their environment. I think. So, I don't think I have it highlighted here. Okay, right. This is why good church design inspires quiet and reverence, why good field house design encourages openness and participation, and why good office design enhances productivity. these concerns must be balanced against the perception of elected officials and the public. Let me just highlight that. An interior that appears to be too nice to the casual observer can be interpreted as an intent to coddle inmates and create a hotel quality environment. So when I saw this, I was like pretty shocked that they would go like, oh hey, so you kind of need to make your prison look like shit because it needs to make other people think that you're not treating the prisoners well. It's really fucked up. The mission statement of the jail, see Chapter 2, will go a long way towards setting the aesthetic tone for the interior of the building. The research has shown that where jails have eliminated the symbol of incarceration and provided a more normal setting, there have been positive effects on inmate behavior. Example, a reduction in vandalism, assault, and stress, as long as this approach is rooted in the actual operational philosophy used to manage the inmates. These jails tend to use elements such as carpet on the floor, wood cell doors, non-fixed furnishing, bright colors, and lots of daylight. Although using these features may seem counter to ideas about what makes a jail secure, inmates tend to treat the jail with more respect if its design communicates to them that they are also going to be treated with respect. Of course. So there's another part I want to go into that I found very interesting. It's up here. So, I know there's a lot colored here. So a very interesting piece that I saw when I was looking at this. So I just focus on this diagram here. The windows are supposed to be placed up here so that the prisoners and the people entering the prison don't meet. Like their eyes don't meet. So as like a way to kind of like limit the awkwardness of like seeing a person that's in prison. So if there is like a window that's down here, there's a wall blocking off like people from the people not in the prison from people inside the prison. So there is a there is like a term used, like it's here, it's called the envelope of the building. So it's basically, oh no, why did I do that? It's basically the, when I say envelope, it may be the exterior facade / structure of the building and how you design it and how it's perceived by those who are either looking in or out of it. When designing a building, the envelope is like one of the important pieces that you need to figure out to communicate what your design is going to be. Whether it's going to be like a barnyard house where like it's like very stretched out long, or something that's just a cube. Those elements very much matter to like what you're trying to convey. Excuse me. I think that's everything. I kind of want me to peek down and see if I can find. Okay, here we go. Okay. So you talk about like sound buffers here. So, this specifically is talking about like the courtyard to sound buffers to like the visiting. So you're trying to keep a separation, like a almost like isolating them from the outside world, but also isolating people from the inside of the reality of the prison. It's more about making the people who are visiting the prison more comfortable than the people who are within the prison. I want to find out. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, this is another important thing. This is about separation from now public to public areas. But I think like the most important thing you should like learn here, it's about like allocation of space. So when you are what's what I'm looking for? laying out like a space, let's say like if you're gonna do like a school, you have to figure out where everything's gonna be like centralized. So you have like bubbles to kind of like break up, like, okay, so the lunch room is going here, and then the library is going here, the gym is going here. And like using this sort of like method is very helpful to kind of figure out how you want to connect your spaces, and as well as for movement between these spaces. So that's one of thresholds, like where your thresholds are and where everything connects is like incredibly important in architecture. This accessible cell, that's what I was trying to look for. Okay, that's accessible cell. No, because like, even though you're a prison, we still want to be able to get into your prison cell. I don't know if I have it. I knew I should have found that again. This is I had a copy of this for myself a while back, but I had to re-find it because I don't know where I saved it, and I don't have the specific stamp anymore where I saved the cell size. It isn't super important, but I kind of wanted to show you. Oh no! Oh, here we go. Here's some ADA. Okay, it's still ADA. I was trying to look for specifically cell size, but it's not super important. Just give me a couple seconds. See if I can find it. If not, then we'll just move on. Okay, it doesn't like me. Expansion, mass control, intake, release, healthcare, visiting hearing exercise. Okay, so they basically have a breakdown of everything. Storage. There you go. Okay, so there's a single versus multiple occupancy. Okay. That is another thing. It's like the square footage of your cell matters a bit more than the shape of your cell. So this one is a bit funky looking, but like there isn't too much of a poo-poo towards like this sort of weird looking thing, as long as it like meets the square footage like requirements. Let me see. Okay, well that's enough for now. I'll probably maybe I'll come back to this later when I can find what exactly I want, but I want to keep you guys in rapture with that. We have this done, so we're gonna go to the Eastern State Penitentiary. So I got this video, and then I have this video.
We consider Eastern State America's most historic prison. It was opened in 1829, so we see copies of Eastern State all over the globe, making this arguably history's most influential prison. I'd say when I first started here that most people were here for the dark tourism side of things, to hear about escapes and Al Capone and Silver Era gangsters, things like that. But I've really seen a change in our visitors, especially in the last 5 years. I'd say there's a lot of people coming here to learn about criminal justice reform, social justice, to hold discussions and dialogues about really the shortcomings of our criminal justice system. So we're really trying, again, to connect the past with the present here and learn something from the legacy of America's most historic prison. I would define dark tourism as a site or institution whose history or content or subject matter has to do with something morbid: pain, suffering, trauma, death, dying, these kinds of things. Eastern State's often known as the world's first true penitentiary, and what that means is a building designed to inspire regret. And a big part of how the prison officials did that was, again, through architecture. The outside of the building resembles a Gothic castle. It's scary, it's intimidating.
So,
it's what we would call...
I didn't go over this specifically. From the Modern Marvels video, they talked about how old castles were also used as prisons. had like old derelict castles used as prisons. Another thing that they use as prisons, like in America as well, but it's not. They're decommissioned right now, but they can be brought back. Is boats. Boats will be used as prisons for citizens if there was an overflow.
A deterrent. But on the inside, visitors to Eastern State are often surprised to see that the cell blocks resemble a cathedral or a church. And the idea was that if a prison looked like a cathedral or a church, people would be more likely to think about what they had done wrong, to reflect, and to seek penitence or true remorse. And that becomes the root of the word penitentiary. People are really fascinated in penitentiaries. Alcatraz is one of the most visited national parks in the National Park Service. I think that's partial.
I have been to Alcatraz. It's okay. Just don't go like during September, October, because there's a shit ton of flies. They'll just like harass you. It's very upsetting.
Because despite the size of the American prison system, the scope of mass incarceration, most Americans will never go inside of a prison, active or historic. We really go out of our way to engage our visitors in a dialogue and ask them to examine their relationship to the criminal justice system.
Oh, hi, Pimenta.
Really just spark a conversation that we hope to continue.
Pimenta, right now we are... to get like the law of the stuff I talked about, you'll have to watch the beginning. But right now we are looking at Eastern State Penitentiary, which is one of the first like penitentiaries which was in America, and it's very influential. Oh my god. Influential. Oh my god, I can't speak.
After the museum exhibit visit is done. We have an annual haunted house fundraiser that goes through the prison called Terror Behind the Walls, and it's one of the biggest haunted houses in the United States, one of the highest rated haunted houses in the country, and it pays our bills, really. So we use it to stabilize this National Historic Landmark, to fund daytime public programming.
About 66% of the operating budget for the historic site comes from Terror Behind the Walls, the event, so it's amazing that what we do kind of contributes to maintaining this beautiful space. Historic space.
So we have about an hour from our daytime to nighttime. We have a giant tech team that basically turn off historic lights, flip the switch on for the haunted house lights, have the fog machines going, music going. It's a quick process. We have 300 staff every night, so we have them come in about 15-minute intervals to get into costume and makeup. Our makeup team is 26. We have 26 makeup artists per night that transform about close to 300 actors in about 2.5 hours to 3 hours.
We do our best to keep Terror Behind the Walls from impacting the daytime museum experience as much as possible, so a lot of it does take place in parts of the building that daytime visitors don't see, but sometimes that's not possible.
That's
at points it does cross over through like the Central Rotunda and some of the cell blocks on the eastern half of the building. I think a lot of people come here because of its reputation as a site of paranormal activity. You know, that's awesome, and we encourage people to come for whatever their interests are. I would say that just our mission is really about hosting a dialogue about these critical issues concerning our criminal justice system. There's more to do there. There's more work to do there.
I know a little bit about Alcatraz. Like the things I know is like there was a protest of indigenous people on Alcatraz that try to like convert it into like a place that they could live, but it's hard to do because there's like really no natural resources to Alcatraz. And then God, what else was it? It was the Clint Eastwood movie Escape from Alcatraz. So when I was looking for like videos specifically on the Eastern State Penitentiary, a lot of them had to do with like spooky ghost stuff, and I'm like, I don't really care that much about spooky ghost stuff. With this stream, I kind of wanted to do more like, let's look at the architecture. So this one is, I have not got a chance to look at this, so hopefully it's interesting. I'm excited for it. Hey, Chucklehead.
The now empty Eastern
RS.
State Penitentiary is a haunting relic looming over the city skyline as a grim testament.
So I want to see what the
America's
central
past.
part
Within
looks
these
like.
walls, the state employed such peculiar and harrowing methods of punishment that I wouldn't even be allowed to describe them on YouTube. And yet, surprisingly, this formidable institution was once considered a pioneer in reform. The history runs deep here, from Al Capone's designer cell to forgotten escape
Yeah.
So join us to find out what remains.
I've
This
been
is the
to
story
Alcatraz
of the Eastern
once.
State Penitentiary. I'm your host, Ryan Sokash, and you're watching It's History.
I think I have some photos still I can share.
Let's start in colonial times, when jails and prisons were raunchy and corrupt businesses. You see, back then, many were commercial ventures, filled with working girls, corrupt officials, chaos.
Oh, that's another thing. So, back in the day, women and men actually kind of stayed in the same prison, but like women were usually kept like further away from the men. It wasn't until like, I believe can't remember her name. Like a lady was like, "Hey, I believe women crime doers can be reformed. They should get their own prison all to themselves, away from the men who will cause them to sin."
And a little bit of alcohol for good measure. They were nothing more than holding pens for any sort of undesirables, holding normal people alongside petty criminals and violent offenders. Conditions were so bad that starvation, cold, disease, and violence often killed prisoners before they were even sentenced. In the 1700s, capital punishment was by far most common for serious crimes committed in the colonies. Retribution, also known as corporal punishment, was also common. This entailed physically injuring someone as a consequence of wrongdoing, which included flogging, maiming, branding, and even blinding. Flogging meant punishing a criminal with a whip or rod.
Okay.
Maiming was the forcible removal of extremities, and branding often involved a hot iron with a letter or symbol identifying a person's crime. Another form of punishment was the stocks or pillory, which restrained a prisoner as the crowd mocked and hurled stones or...
That's funny. I believe this image was used in the Modern Marvels video we were watching, if I remember correctly.
rotten food at them. These measures were reserved for less serious crimes in the colonies, such as dishonest trading or public intoxication. The stocks held you by the feet and forced you to sit up and face the stoning, while the pillory forced your head and hands into a wooden or metal frame, causing you to bend over for anywhere from half an hour to an entire day. It was a painful and humiliating experience. With that in mind, that's why it's no wonder that people began to question the nature of prisons and what was going on inside. Once the United States had secured their freedom in 1783, the Philadelphia citizens, led by Dr. Benjamin Rush, among others, began to reform the harsh penal code of
Okay, so Benjamin Rush was the creator of the Eastern State Penitentiary.
The new code replaced severe punishment with public labor, while they began to take a closer look at the conditions of the Walnut Street Jail. Built in 1776 to relieve the overcrowding and disreputable conditions at Philadelphia's Old Stone Jail, Walnut Street Jail wasn't much of an improvement. Its disgraceful conditions, coupled with the public's reaction to convicts working in the streets, led to the creation of the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisoners, whose goal it was to correct issues in prisons which didn't take into consideration the age, gender, or nature of the crime for its prisoners. It was founded by Dr. Benjamin Rush in 1787 and was one of the first prison reform groups in the world, with Benjamin Franklin joining soon thereafter. Conception of the Eastern State was upon its creation. The group began looking into Walnut Street Jail and were shocked by the poor conditions, and so they presented an account of their investigations to the state legislature a year later, recommending solitary confinement and hard labor as an effective reformation strategy. This is because they thought being alone with your thoughts would give you time to reflect on your actions and therefore reform. So in 1790, 16 single cells were built.
We did talk earlier about how solitary confinement doesn't really help people and is like a detriment to people, because humans are social creatures, and then locking a person away by themselves to their thoughts is not really helpful for. It's not very helpful for them.
In Walnut Street Jail to test the effectiveness of day and night solitary confinement, but that was only the beginning. After many years of lobbying, the Philadelphia Society received funding from the Pennsylvania legislature to build a new prison in 1821. What came to be known as Eastern State would be a new type of prison, featuring solitary confinement for all of its 250 prisoners, a measure that officials of the time believed encouraged penance, and what most would argue was the world's first major penitentiary. When Eastern State Penitentiary was constructed, it was one of the most expensive prisons ever made, with a price around $780,000.
And we found out the reason it was so expensive is because of the sheer size of each cell block. At least that's what I picked up. He probably may have something different, maybe, but we were looking at a different website that was kind of give some information in regard to it, and this is one of the floor plans for it. And so I go back here. I kind of this is more like a simplified view of it. Let's see. Okay, so 1966 became a monument. Okay. So this is a sky view of it. And then we're gonna go over here. We have some footage for us to look at, because I peeked at this before, but I was like, why not? get like a bit of a tour of sorts. Oh no, I popped it out. Whoopsie. I thought it would like, oh, okay. I'm like, oh, I wanted to pop it out, like go through it specifically, but apparently it doesn't want me to do that yet, and I just fucked it up. All right. Oh well. Let me restart it. And okay. So let's just see this. We go. There's research here. Let's see what this research is. Okay. So, hi Pippi. What do you want, girl? Got my cat right next to me. She's like, oh, getting closer to dinner time. And I'm like, okay, kitty, go sleep with your sister. All right. Okay. Go back to the video.
And is considered to be the first modern prison. The design of the penitentiary was decided by competition, with multiple architects submitting designs to be considered. In the end, John Haviland won out. He was a British architect who had settled in Philadelphia.
Okay.
His rival, William Strickland, winning the
Haviland is the
$100 prize in the process. Construction began in 1821, and Strickland was chosen to oversee the project, but fired just a year later and replaced by his competitor. When Eastern State was conceived, solitary confinement didn't really exist as a concept. It hadn't been instituted in most prisons before, so this would be the first time to institute it in full force. The idea was to make prisoners feel truly alone, in order to repent for their crimes. To this end, the prison was designated with 250 prisoners in mind, each with their own cell for the entirety of their sentence. The entrance to each cell was a small door that forced prisoners to bow when entering or exiting the cell, as if to a higher power, encouraging a penitent attitude. This was reinforced by vaulted ceilings and skylights, which the architect claimed let God's light and wisdom shine down upon them. To prevent inmates from seeing guards
we
or
talked
other
a bit
prisoners,
about
cells had so-called
we talked a bit about the Panopticon Pimenta. There is I'll link it in the description. This person right here, I'll just mute it. They did like a really good video on it. I will say the music is unsettling as you get further through it. So like, so yeah, so you can see, the jailer can see you, you can't see them, sort of thing, and then the like the more central design. This one I feel like is a bit more related to like the concept and an actual like creation of it. Because I pointed out like in the film Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, the Guardians are in a prison that is a Panopticon, where it's basically a cylinder with like a watchtower in the center. I don't want to bring up. I don't know how fucking litigious Marvel is, but I don't want to bring up the movie. People are gonna check it out.
feed doors and personal exercise yards, and in a time when even the White House had no indoor plumbing, Eastern State had faucets and flushing toilets. The penitentiary had no cooling system, but in the winter, hot water was piped through the prison to provide brief relief from the cold.
Yeah, they had
the
heating,
prison was
but no
designed
cooling.
in a wagon wheel layout. 7 single-story cell blocks extended circularly around a central point, giving guards a clear line of sight virtually anywhere in the prison at any time. 2 cell blocks were completed before Eastern State opened in 1829, less than a week shy of Halloween. In 1831, cell block 3, the last of the original single-story cell blocks, was completed. From this point forward, cell blocks were built with 2 stories or more, as more and more people were incarcerated there. Cell blocks 4 through 7 were all built with 2 stories and were completed in 1835. In all, the prison covers 11 acres.
Yeah. Is either we give them too much privacy or no privacy. So I know when I was reading on Michel Foucault talked a bit about it, and it's like the Panopticon isn't just for like the jailers towards prisoners, it's also prisoners for each other because they're also watching each other as well. And we what was it? Oh no, I had another thought that was very deep and profound, but I completely lost it midway through my little ramble. Yeah, okay. I go kind of briefly if when you want to go back, Minta. into like the standards for like prison design, and then sort of like viewing each other, the views of inmates versus like visitors and such like that.
With 450 heated cells, not to mention state-of-the-art plumbing and sewage systems. It was a technological and architectural marvel. But even after the prison's creation, all was not well. In 1877, 4 new cell blocks needed to be built, this time without exercise yards, since they utilized space between existing cell blocks. However, after this, yet more space was needed. In 1911, cell block 12 was built between cell blocks 6 and 7, made of reinforced concrete and having 3 stories.
Okay, so this explains this specific design, where you can tell like more, like you can tell like they're trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole sort of situation. They're trying to like compensate for like they didn't prepare for they didn't expect her to be like expansion, I guess I can assume. That's probably like a lack of foresight, if I can assume that he's going to talk about.
40 cells each. 12 had no arched ceilings or skylights, only narrow windows in each cell. Cell block 13 was opened between 1909 and 1926. Little is known about its early use, but one fact is clear. This was the block where most punishments were dealt. Known as the Hole, or the Klondike, it housed 10 dark, poorly ventilated cells with iron beds and barely enough room to breathe. Cells were about half the size of those found in normal prisons, often limiting the ability to stand, treatment that would constitute extreme cruelty by today's standards. The last block built was Cell Block 14 in 1926, a 3-story building that completely eliminated the last of the spaces between any other blocks. And it needs to be pointed out that a prison meant to hold 250 prisoners was now packed with 1,700, putting prisoners in a precarious situation, to say the least.
So we went from 250 to like over 1,000. So it's, I don't know. It's probably the one he showed was like the original plan, and this is just what came after. So like, I can assume these dark spots are the original, and then everything else is what it was added on. Excuse me. It also could be because this is, at least from what I can tell, a single story. That could have also been the issue as well, because if they had built it for multiple stories, it would have probably done a lot better in the long run. But they just built it for single story. Back here.
Perhaps it would be prudent to point out that if you find yourself in that situation, or any other unjust situation for that matter, you might want to seek legal help immediately. Check out our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury. Saw many changes. 9 on your phone. Thank you, Morgan & Morgan, for supporting the channel.
Thank you, Morgan.
Back to the Eastern State.
I don't need you right now.
Throughout the years, the compound saw many changes. On top of, or rather inside, new cell blocks, staff and prisoners alike have modified the facility to their needs. One of the first changes to Eastern State was Warden Michael Cassidy's impressive office space. He built the office for his work in the 1880s, but later wardens moved their offices into the administration building. This gave way for the religious staff, the Protestant, Jewish, and Catholic chaplains to move in. Another religious space constructed in the penitentiary was the Eastern State Synagogue, perhaps the first of its kind in an American prison. Built in 1924, the synagogue featured dark wooden benches, an ark reader's table, an ornate plaster Star of David, and an eternal flame. It remained a staple of Eastern State's religious community for the duration of the prison's use. You would almost think that the penitentiary, with its spiritual outlook and divinity-inspired architecture, would be effective in reforming its prisoners with religion. Well, in 1955, one prisoner actually was. Lester Smith, who had been convicted of multiple armed robberies, converted to Catholicism while in prison. With the Bible being the only book available, he read the scripture and painted, which was a hobby that he had taught himself, using the signature Paul Martin to honor his 2 favorite saints. One day, the penitentiary's Catholic chaplain, Father Edwin Geller, saw him painting in his cell and invited him to decorate the offices where the priest met and counseled prisoners. Smith accepted, and in 1955, he had painted 23 murals, each with beautiful, vulnerable art. The most striking mural is named The Penitent Prisoner, which depicts a kneeling prisoner seeking forgiveness from God. Smith's paintings set apart the Catholic chaplain's room from others and are testaments to someone who underwent a powerful change while in prison. But just what is a prison, if not its famous prisoners, you ask? Eastern State was home to all manner of prisoners, most notably the Chicago gangster Al Capone and the infamous bank robber Willie Sutton. On May the 17th, 1929, Al Capone, Scarface himself, was returning from a trip to Atlantic City when his journey was cut short. Capone was arrested outside a Philadelphia movie theater for carrying an illegally concealed and unlicensed .38 revolver. Philadelphia courts were tough and gave him the maximum sentence of 1 year in prison. Capone was sent to Eastern State to serve out his sentence, but while the courts wanted to make an example of him, the prison treated him as an esteemed guest. Philadelphia newspapers reported that Capone's cell had lavish furniture, beautiful rugs, tasteful oil paintings, and a radio that he used to listen to waltzes.
Okay. I remember this. I remember, apparently Al Capone, like, lived in, like, the lap of luxury.
Essentially. His high-class treatment. Capone was not all that eager to get out of the clink. You see, his arrest lined up perfectly with the rise of mob violence in Chicago, and hence many accused him of actually hiding in prison on purpose. The mob boss denied these rumors and spent thousands of dollars trying to get himself released, but with no results. In the end, he was released after 9 months on good behavior on March the 17th, 1930. Willie Sutton is a different story, also known as Slick Willie, Willie the Actor, and the Gentleman Bandit. Sutton spent his early adulthood robbing banks, using disguises and charm, but he wasn't always successful and would get arrested multiple times throughout his career. One of his arrests was in 1934 for the brazen machine gun robbery of the Corn Exchange Bank in Philly. Luckily, he was an accomplished escape artist too, attempting at least 5 escapes during his time at Eastern State Penitentiary.
That is one thing I did wonder is an issue, not an issue with a constant thing that was brought up with like prisons is the possibility that someone may be like escape is what's the word I'm looking for? My brain. So when they were talking about previous prisons like Alcatraz, was it? I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember something, but like there is an issue with like no matter how like much tech, finger quotes, they put into the prison to prevent people from escaping, you have basically like a whole mass of people who have all the free time in the world to think up how to get around the system that you placed. Like, Pippi, please, I love you. Please let me finish my thoughts so I don't lose it. Like, there was one prison where basically 3 people just walked out the front door just by like just putting on different clothes and like leaving with like a tour group. Or a 1 year vacation for the Okay, I'm gonna take like a quick break just because Pippi like wants me to pay attention to her and I don't want to like ignore her for too long. So I will be right back. I'll give you some company with some music. I should be like maybe like a minute or 2. I just want to make sure she is okay. I'll be right back. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's true. Oh my god. Okay, I gave her some dry food. So, like, the cats are gone for right now because I left my office and they're like, oh, it's time to go do other things. Alright. Go back to the video.
one of these escape attempts in his 1953 autobiography, Where the Money Was, where he takes credit as the mastermind behind the operation. But in reality, this escape plan was the work of 12 men led by a prisoner named Clarence Kleindienst, or Clinny. Clinny was a plasterer, stonemason, burglar, and forger who also had a reputation as a top-notch scavenger. Sutton himself said, quote, "If you gave Clinny 2 weeks, he could get you Ava Gardner, a famous movie actress from the time." He continues, "If you gave Clinny a year, he could get you out of prison." So it was him who came up with the idea to dig a tunnel out of Eastern State Penitentiary. Almost as if out of a movie, the crew of 12 men dug a tunnel from cell 68 using spoons and...
So that's also that's benefit for the justice system, but like one of the finger quotes benefits of prefabbed cells is that you can avoid this by like having the cell reinforced. So this I assume is that actually I'll let him go and describe exactly what material they dug through before I like make an assumption.
And flattened cans as shovels. In 2-man teams of 30-minute shifts, the crew slowly dug an opening through the wall and into the ground, hiding the dirt in their pockets and scattering that dirt throughout the yard.
Okay. So they specifically had dug through dirt, where like a prefab will be like concrete or steel or rebar, enforced concrete. So this is Shawshank Redemption.
Amazingly, the entrance to...
It's been a hot minute since I've seen Shawshank Redemption, so I that realization like went over my head.
The tunnel escaped inspection several times, thanks to a false panel treated by Clinny to match the plaster of the cell walls. The tunnel was also reinforced with scaffolding and illuminated as a true feat of engineering. The prisoners made a system to deposit their waste and prevent noxious fumes from escaping their tunnel when it reached the prison sewer line. After months of toil, the tunnel was 38 inches wide and stretched 100 feet beyond the walls of the prison. The prisoners were ready to escape. On the morning of April the 3rd, 1945, the 12 men snuck away to cell 68 on their way to breakfast, and from there, they quickly disappeared into the tunnel. Half of the escapees were caught by the end of the day, with the rest being caught within a couple of months. 2 escapees, including Sutton, were caught within 3 minutes of freedom and were sent to the cramped, dark Klondikes. Clinny himself only made it 3 hours before being caught. In the end, their escape was a failure. Months of work focused on one moment boiled down.
My thing is like, how did they get caught? Was it just like, were they being stupid? Like, was it just that their faces were known? Because it's like back in those days, like it says you don't have the internet. You have like newspaper, or they just because of their outfits. Because they said in Modern Marvels specifically, the prison outfit is just made to like make it harder for prisoners to escape. But I don't know.
Down to a flash in the pan and the capture of all who were involved. After the tunnel was found, guards filled it with ash and covered it with cement.
Maybe the real treasure was poo we crawled through along the way.
It wasn't all for nothing. For his part, Sutton was transferred to the escape-proof Holmesburg prison, which surprisingly to everyone, he promptly escaped from. He evaded the law for years, while his story inspired every inmate who came after him. To this day, it's the most famous escape in Eastern State history, and no doubt inspired all manner of prison-based pop culture, down to digging a tunnel with a spoon used for public perception. After Eastern State Penitentiary's creation, it quickly became the most copied building in the United States. And the same solitary confinement practices were adopted by more than 300 prisons worldwide.
This right here, I can assume is the original design. Oh, look at here. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Okay, so yeah, so you see these get added in. You have these buildings. Then you have here, which is, I assume is the entrance to here. Okay.
Spurred by
it's kind of
design.
like when in architecture school or classes, when you are trying to come up with a design, like you're trying to pinpoint what you want to do with like a piece of architecture, like you want to do an auditorium or a library. You always want to take from pre-existing buildings. It's like you're sort of like a inspiration, in a sense. concepts are called precedents, where you take another building and you break it down, like what works about it, what does not work about it, what's the history of it, what's the context that it was built in, what's the material that it's made of, and you kind of break that down so you then can improve your building as well as take like inspiration from other buildings. Usually you would need about 3 precedents, and you need to make sure that you provide like a good explanation, justification for why you chose these precedents and how they impact your design. By the way, Shawshank was originally a Stephen King story. Yeah, I know Stephen King wrote it. I remember like Stephen King telling some stories where like a woman says, "Oh, I hate Stephen King's like stories. They're so scary." And then she goes like, "But I really like the Shawshank Redemption." And it's like, oh man. I don't know if this is true, but I heard this. Like there was like thanks to like Shawshank Redemption became like a more empathetic overall view of prisoners in media. But I don't know how true that is. I heard it before, but I would have to like fact check where I heard that.
Tourists flocked to Philadelphia and toured the prison in the 1830s and 40s. Charles Dickinson was one of these visitors, but after seeing the poor conditions and talking to prisoners whose minds were fragile and weak, he came away appalled and wrote that solitary confinement was, quote, torturing of the mind that is much worse than any other physical punishment that can be administered. He was not the only one who held the sentiment. A series of investigations into the Eastern states' finances, punishment practices, and deviations from the Pennsylvania system have been going on for years. Solitary confinement was officially abandoned in 1913, but truthfully, the system had broken down decades before. Now cells were shared by 2 to 3 prisoners, but this only gave the penitentiary the chance to carry out its punishment in new ways. In the 1920s and 30s, Warden Hubert Hardboil Smith, as they called him, ruled over the prison with an iron fist. During his
Warden of the Eastern Penitentiary, who was praised yesterday by Dr. J. Evans Skeely, State Secretary of Welfare, for his administrative work at Cherry Hill, 21st Street, and Fairmount Avenue.
His reign, prisoners rioted and set fire to their cells over low wages, overcrowding, and
Green
a
Mile
lack
makes
of
me
recreational
sad.
facilities. But every riot was put down with a strong show of force. This was also the time when the Klondikes were starting to be used again. Eastern State.
Now I remember I was gonna say there was with prisons from like the 50s to 70s. There was like an issue with like a lot of riots. And like a lot of prison changes past this were like figuring ways to squash riots before they happen. Like they mentioned Attica, which is a pretty famous one. I know there's like another one that is super famous, but like my brain is like fucking failing me. I side note, I made like a tiki funny, but I guess because Beckett isn't American, he doesn't know what Attica is, so he thought I said Attacca, which I thought was really funny.
Became a place prisoners were only sent if the state believed that they needed Smith's brutal reform tactics. Which is ironic, considering that the reason it was created in the first place was because people felt current punishments were far too harsh. So how did this prison, which inspired hundreds across the globe, ultimately fall apart? Well, the answer lies in Eastern States' creation. The Pennsylvania prison system, also known as the separate system, became too costly to maintain. It required prisoners to feel completely isolated from the moment they walked in. Each prisoner had their own cell, their own exercise yard, food had to be delivered individually through feed doors, and exercise times had to be carefully scheduled to prevent neighboring inmates from interacting.
Yeah, so like one issue with this prison that is very obvious when we like looked at other ones is that there is like you are locked to your cell and you are basically kept away from everybody, but it also makes it harder for everyone else. There's more like labor that needs to be done because you are separated from everyone else. So normally like prisons you would go to like a chow hall to eat, but like since they don't have that, and they have 1,000 prisoners in like a place that should only hold 250. you have to like double, triple, quadruple your efforts to get like everyone fed at the exact same time during the day.
One another. Critics also protested against the negative effects of solitary confinement, which we now know were worse than they could have ever imagined. Within the prison, prisoners weren't just isolated. It felt as if no one else even existed. They did everything alone, from eating to bathing. And in the process, they weren't even allowed to speak to themselves. They were drowning in utter silence, with guards wearing felt covers on their shoes to reduce the noise they made. And when they did leave the cell, a hood was frequently put over their head so they couldn't see any other human being. It was psychological torture at its finest. Although it could be argued that the Philadelphia Society meant well, modern science tells us that the use of solitary confinement is one of the worst possible punishments that they could carry out. Humans are social creatures, and it's widely agreed that we have a fundamental need for connection. Even as far back as 50 years ago, research linked social isolation and sensory deprivation with slowed brain activity.
Okay. I was like, what the fuck's up with this video? It's like skipping. I guess they didn't. I guess like the rendering was fucking up towards the end because it's just like
1 week in solitary
being jumpy
could lead to significant changes in the brain, resulting in damage to learning, memory, and awareness, qualities that were most often just exchanged for highlighted anxiety and fear. Research also shows that social deprivation can cause people to experience social pain, which the brain processes the same way as physical pain. And with that in mind, if prisoners had existing mental illnesses, which they are likely to have had, then solitary confinement only made them worse. In fact, it can also lead to prisoners developing new mental illnesses, such as anxiety, depression, insomnia, PTSD, paranoia, and psychosis. Prisoners in solitary confinement are 3 times more likely to have hypertension, 3 times more likely to hurt themselves, and 5 times more likely to end their lives. So, for many valid reasons, the Pennsylvania system was abandoned. In its place came the Auburn system, which was inspired by the Philadelphia Society. Originating in 1819 in Auburn, New York, this system had prisoners eat and work together, but not speak during these activities. The system also believed the prisoners had the potential to corrupt each other if they had too much contact, so they were held in solitary confinement cells at night. But with the loss of one punishment came the rise of many others. Whenever a prisoner stepped out of line or even spoke, they were met with lashing by a leather strap, the water bath, the hole, or the mad chair. The lashings are self-explanatory, and we've already covered the hole, also known as the Klondikes, but the other punishments require a little more detail. The water bath involved dunking a prisoner in ice-cold bath water and then hanging them out to dry overnight. The cruelest guards would save this punishment for the winter, and the water froze on the prisoner's skin. For the mad chair, prisoners were tightly strapped to a chair for hours or sometimes days before being released. Their movement and circulation was restricted for so long that prisoners spent days recovering from the punishment, often unable to walk. Some prisoners even lost their limbs to amputation when the circulation didn't return. With that being said, Eastern State Penitentiary was a truly awful place, with many prisoners ending their lives to escape punishment in one form or another. And it's no wonder that the Pennsylvania legislature recommended abandoning the penitentiary in 1945, followed by investigations lasting until 1959. But what happened next all but sealed the prison's fate. In 1961, John Clausenberg tricked a guard into opening the cell of another prisoner, Manuel Magendral. Together, they overpowered the guard and started the largest riot in the prison's history. Several hours later, a large force of policemen, guards, and state troopers were assembled to reclaim the prison. They regained control, but the riots fueled more discussion about Eastern State's closure. Almost as if to sign a death warrant, the federal government designated the penitentiary a National Historic Landmark in 1965, before it finally closed down permanently just 5 years later. Most of the prisoners were sent to the state correctional...
Okay. What was that? I saw this, which was 1996. Okay, so the World Monument Watch. Okay, over time, the Pennsylvania system was criticized for its reliance on extreme solitary confinement. Eastern State gradually moved to a congregate system, officially discontinued use of the Pennsylvania system in 1913. In 1971, the penitentiary closed. Potential development of the site in the late 1980s spurred local and state preservation efforts. Okay. Limit tours of the site began in 1988, and this prison opened for its first full season of regular tours in 1994. The site was included on the World Monuments Watch in 1996 to highlight the preservation effort that had begun and to call attention to the need for resource and extensive conservation at the historic site. Okay.
Institution at Gradeford. But funny enough, the building housed more prisoners from the Holmesburg County Prison after a riot there. Eastern State Penitentiary formally closed its doors in 1971, but its building remains in Philadelphia as a very haunting scar. After Eastern State Penitentiary closed and all the remaining prisoners had been moved out, the city of Philadelphia purchased the building for $400,000. They thought it could be renovated and transformed into anything from an apartment complex to a mall, but instead it sat and collected dust for decades. Hence, the Philadelphia Streets Department used the penitentiary grounds for storage, and the last city caretaker, Dan McLeod, fed the colony of stray cats that took up residence in the empty halls. Vandals smashed skylights and windows.
Okay, you can't mention a colony of cats and then not have any photos. That's blasphemy, sir.
While an urban forest grew in its
Right,
halls
Stormy?
and cells.
That's
It wasn't
blasphemy,
until
Stormy.
1988 that the Eastern State
Stormy's,
Task Force
sitting
was
next to me,
formed,
looking at me
made up
sadly.
of architects, preservationists, and historians. They convinced the city to preserve the prison, rather than turn it into something else. Mayor Wilson Goode urged the Redevelopment Authority to reject all proposals for commercial use of the property, and limited tours started later that year. At first, tourists needed to wear hard hats to tour the crumbling prison, but after extensive stabilization efforts that began in 1991, tourists no longer needed one. The first of its popular Halloween fundraisers also started this year, allowing visitors to tour the prison as a haunted house. The Terror Behind the Walls event had been held every year since. Eastern State Penitentiary opened for daily historic tours in 1994, receiving
Prison
10,000 visitors
meow.
in its first year, which notably is more than the original prison had since 1858. In 1996, permanent museum exhibits were constructed and a marketing campaign for the prison began. And then finally, mass popularity came when Eastern State was featured in the Bruce Willis movie, 12 Monkeys. In 1998, Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site Incorporated was formed, a nonprofit organization dedicated...
I'm just like, oh. But that's pretty cool. I have not seen 12 Monkeys. That's neat when like a location you're looking at is like used in film. Yeah, I'll get to you soon, Stormy. I promise. She's moving. She's moved beside me to in front of the front of the monitor.
to preserving, interpreting, and teaching the history of the infamous prison. Then, in 2003, to celebrate the 10th season of public tours, the Voice of Eastern State audio tour was introduced. Upon entering the prison, you are provided with an MP3 player and headphones that will guide you through the prison.
It's like, I think like what would have like helped their like confinement thing is they were like giving like some sort, like if they're like, oh, you're gonna be by yourself, they should give them like a companion of sorts, so they're not completely alone. But like, I don't think you should fucking use solitary confinement anyways.
And its history. The 30-minute audio tour, narrated by actor Steve Buscemi, instructs you on where to
What? Oh my! I need to go here. Okay, you have me at Steve Buscemi gives me an audio tour.
turn and what to look at while in the prison. The tour takes you past many cells and is frequently interrupted by stories of former wardens, guards, and even prisoners. There are also stops for subjects like escapes, sports, sexuality, race, and more. Even though officially it only lasts a half hour, your visit will likely span at least 2. While much of the prison has been kept in its original decaying state to make the venue feel more authentic, other parts have been restored. The penitentiary synagogue, which was used continuously until the prison closed, fell into disrepair during abandonment. But when the building was being preserved, it was the first truly restored space, returning to its appearance from 1959.
I think
a set
you're
of
right,
workshops
Balarna.
next to the synagogue.
I actually have like a couple videos. Okay, it's not on this. I don't have, my playlist is on another tab, but I had like a couple like of the like Netherlands, Norway, their prison system I was gonna look at, but I'm like, oh, this is probably gonna be enough for today. I'm just scratching Stormy's ears, and she's like, oh yeah.
Have been converted into the William Porter Memorial
I'm sorry, you
Exhibit
can't see
for
her.
Jewish Life, and one of Lester Smith's beautiful murals in the Catholic chaplain's office. Well, they also suffered
those sound your ears,
extensive
Rube.
damage during abandonment, but ultimately have been conserved. In 2005, marking the 60th anniversary of Clinny and Sutton's escape, the Eastern State nonprofit conducted a series of architectural surveys to find their tunnel. Using a ground-penetrating radar, they scanned
What?
the
Oh, that's
estimated
cool.
location of
Okay.
the tunnel until they found a part that hadn't collapsed or been filled in by the guards. A rover was sent in to see what remains of the scaffolding and lighting, but no major discoveries were made. Still, the curiosity about this famed tunnel caused the public's interest in Eastern State to be newly ignited. Today, Eastern State Penitentiary is open 12 months a year and 7 days a week. Other than Halloween, it has special events year-round, such as the Winter Adventure Tours, prison uprisings, and Bastille Day celebrations. The Philadelphia Society, which created Eastern State and in turn the modern prison, survives today as the Pennsylvania Prison Society, promoting correctional reform and social justice. Over its dreadful years as a prison, Eastern State has built up a reputation of being one of the most haunted places in the country. Hauntings, spiritual encounters, and sightings are all a part of this prison's folklore. One of the most well-known stories comes from a locksmith who was hired to remove part of cell block 14. While removing a lock, he was overcome by a sudden feeling of dread as the faces of agonizing prisoners lined the walls. Another commonly reported sighting is that of giggling coming from the prison cells. Even Al Capone felt something was amiss, complaining about being haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the victims of the Valentine's Day Massacre he was a part of. The penitentiary has been featured on the Travel Channel's Most Haunted Live, Fox's World's Scariest Places, MTV's Fear, and Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters. Footage captured in Cell Block 12 from Ghost Hunters may be the most controversial ghost sighting in history. Which I suppose brings us full circle. So until next time, this is Ryan Sokash, signing off. And thanks again to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video. Remember, if you're ever injured in an accident, you can submit a claim.
Okay. All right. Go here. I go here. All right. I want to thank everyone for stopping by. So that's the end of my first attempt to do a stream on architecture. I am going to be doing I have a stream tomorrow for some ACC stuff, but next week, what day did I have it set for? Next week Thursday, if we don't have a off block stream, I'm going to do the Kulan stream. I may push that out another day if I don't get to I still need to finish reading one book, and Pimenta gave me a great list of different games to look through that I haven't finished looking at. So if I don't get to it may be a two-parter. I don't want to push it off too far like I did with this one, but I hope everyone will really like that one. I know Falgi has been oh, I can't wait for the Kulan stream. But I hope everyone enjoyed today's stream. We talked about a bunch of different stuff at the beginning of it. So if there's anything you missed, you can always check out the beginning of the stream. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. And I hope you have a good day. And I don't know, I think Beckett's streaming right now. So if you're looking for anything else to watch, Beckett's right there. And have a good day, everybody.